Hi, my name is Jeff Scretny, and I'm the site steward here at LaBagh Woods, located on Chicago's northwest side at the corner of Cicero and Foster Avenue. We have a beautiful place here that often gets overlooked, but right in the heart of the city we have Cook County Forest Preserves, and of our 161 acres, we have 80 acres of cut grove lawn and 80 acres of forest. We have approximately 6 or 7 different types of ecosystem. The first and most obvious one is the cut grove lawn, which is used by people who come here and picnic. That's half of the 160 acres. It's 80 acres. The remaining 81 acres comprises of a number of different types of ecosystem, beginning with the buckthorn forest, oak forest. That's an unmanaged area. That's what we're trying to eliminate. What are we trying to replace it with? Well, we have a number of healthier ecosystems that we want to see here, which includes hardwood forest, oak hardwood forest, and that's usually on the floodplain. Oak savannas, that's usually higher up and off the floodplain. Plus we have wetland areas where the old riverbed used to be, and we have an upland wet prairie, which is a very rare ecosystem that only exists in a few Chicagoland areas where they were never harvested for clay, which was used to make Chicago bricks, or was farmed. So those are the ecosystems that make up LaBagh Woods, and we have several of each. So this is an example of a buckthorn degraded forest. There are some oaks in here and some cottonwoods, but this is basically what we refer to as a degraded buckthorn forest. You can see if you look in here, there are many buckthorns growing, and if you look down in the bottom, you can see there's no herbaceous layer. That's because the buckthorn, through its defense mechanisms, inhibits the growth of other native plants that we would like to have here. This is what we start with. And this is what basically 80 acres of LaBagh was before we began our restoration here. Our goal is to cut and remove the buckthorn. With these big buckthorn, we cut them, we break them down, and we use fire to burn those pieces of wood up. And then we come in and we herbicide the stumps so they don't re-sprout, which they will do instantly if we do not attend to them. Once we've taken out the big buckthorn, we have the other problem of the seeds that exist in the seed bank. And there are thousands of them. We will have to come back in here 3, 4, 5 more years and use herbicide to cut the small regrowth, and then herbicide the stumps to inhibit their growth. And then eventually we'll start introducing herbaceous layer plants as well as native shrubs to compete against what remains in the seed bank, and eventually we'll win that battle. When we finish our restoration work, we'll go from those buckthorn hedge groves to this. This is a seep prairie. It's not a technical term, but it's one that we use. We have water that seeps through here, stays close to the surface on its way down to the river, and I have a wet prairie zone right here. And you can see that this is all open now with herbaceous layer plants. All these plants were either from the seed bank or put in here by us. We have over 50, maybe as many as 75 different plants growing here now, when once all that was here was buckthorn. What you're looking at here is one of the restoration areas that we are most proud of. We have spent the last 2 winters clearing out which was a buckthorn oak degraded forest. And as you can see now behind me, there is no buckthorn except for some resprouts. We've worked very aggressively to empty the buckthorn out, and look what we've done for the oak savanna here. We've literally recreated oak savanna for these 20 or 25 oak trees of 4 different oak species that call this area home. This is what this should look like, with one exception. Because we're early in the restoration process, the herbaceous layer has not responded with the seed bank as we would hope that it would. So what we'll be doing here is to supplement the natural seed bank. We'll be throwing seeds in here that we collect from multiple North Branch sites, and we'll put them in here, as well as add a couple of native shrub clumps, and that will recreate this beautiful oak savanna in what it used to look like, what it should look like, which is big, beautiful oak trees, appropriately spaced with an herbaceous layer and a few clumps of native shrubs. This here is the crown jewel of LaBagh Woods. This is why this woods was saved. This is our upland wet prairie habitat. It's a microhabitat of a bowl of clay that holds water, and that bowl of clay that holds water creates a upland wet prairie, and that wet prairie has a number of very unique plants. Right in here, we have about a half a dozen state threatened and endangered plant species that one of them is found almost nowhere else. Another thing that you might notice when you look at this site is that we have succession taking place. Normally that's something we'd be very happy about, except that there are so few acres of habitat like this in anywhere in the world that we're not thrilled about succession. So when you see ash trees or oak trees getting a root in here, those are trees that we will probably remove.
So you mentioned earlier that when you're doing restoration, you're trying to bring it back to what it's supposed to be. How do we know what it's supposed to be? How do we know what it's supposed to look like?
That's a great question, Art, and it's a question that a lot of people have some pretty raging debates over. A volunteer like myself really relies on the advice that's given to us from the ecologists. The Cook County Forest Preserve employ a number of ecologists, and it's their job to know those things. But where do they get their information? Even a curious person like myself wants to know. And a lot of what is looked at is the surveys that were done in the early 1800s, from 1804 to 1835, when they literally made plats of all this land inside the Indian boundary. And what they do is they'd plat out 1 square mile sections of land that you can see, and if you look back at the old plat maps. When they did that, they wrote descriptions, sometimes very detailed descriptions, of what flora and fauna was living in the areas where they made their plats. And that's what we're looking at when we think about how do we want to restore this.
Okay, so how is the work actually done? How do you go from this degraded ecosystem with a bunch of invasives to a restored ecosystem?
Well, it's often joked that what we are is forest gardeners. But seriously, once we get a plan, the first thing that happens is the ecologist comes out here with the site stewards, and we walk through and we make a 2-year plan for our restoration activities. And then anything we do in the next 2 years must be in that plan. It's got to be written into the plan that this is work that we're going to accomplish. And we know that we have about 110 invasive plants in here. Some of them are as simple as we pull them up when we see them. With the buckthorn, we have a season in the winter where we remove it for the big woody stuff, and then there's different times of year we do different actions on the other different invasives, and we have a process laid out in our work plan that we look to. But for like the individual person, how does Steve or Joanne decide that they want to come out and join us? Well, they would go to the Cook County Forest Preserve's website, and you look under volunteers, and in the volunteer section you can type in a keyword, LaBagh Woods, and then it'll show you the calendar that we have for restoration days. We basically are out here 2 days a month, sometimes 3 days a month, and we're doing restoration work usually from 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. It's a 3-hour stint. Anybody can do this, and literally any age can do this. We have people as young as 4 years old come help us. We've had people in their 80s come out and help us. We will teach you everything. We bring all the tools, we bring all the supplies, we provide all the education that you need to help us make a difference.
And then finally, why? Why are you putting so much work into restoring an area? For what benefit?
Another great question that has a lot of, again, I'm not going to say controversial, but lots of people are trying to understand, what are we restoring to? Well, we want to restore this to a floodplain hardwood oak area, and we want to restore it to an oak savanna. But why? Well, because that's what should be here, and we know that oak savanna now makes up less than, I think it's 1/10% of the acreage it used to be. It's a very rare habitat. But more importantly, we have to deal with the issue of climate change. And as the climate change, plants migrate. And normally they migrate on their own, and they can migrate by a couple of inches a year to a couple of meters a year. And they would move to a place where they can feel more comfortable growing. It's not going to happen with all the fragmentation we have now because of human development. So in the end, LaBagh Woods becomes a seed bank. We are putting in here these species. Right now we've identified almost 1,100 species that live here in LaBagh Woods. And of those plant species, we are the keepers of those plants and those seeds, which will be used at some point by somebody else 50 years down the road to take them up to the Wisconsin border and start a new oak savanna there.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking me on a tour of this entire forest, and hopefully we'll see some success.
Thank you. And I can't believe I'm just watching a butterfly that I've been after all year go by. Sorry, damn it. You may have to just hold me for a second and see if I can find that. I'm very happy with that butterfly photo. Literally, the plants in this area were put here for that butterfly. You helped plant these, and these are here, and they will provide a host plant for the great swallowtail, which is the largest butterfly we have in North America.
I helped plant those. Yay!